Hi everyone, this is Blake Anderson, and I'm a registered social worker and therapist here in Toronto, Ontario. And I have over 14 years of experience as a registered social worker and 5 years as a therapist. In this video, I'm going to be responding to this therapist by the name of Chess. She has a video that talks about the 4 signs that your sibling is a narcissist. So I'm going to be going through her video, responding to some of her comments, and just give you some of my perspective on what she shared.
So, in no particular order, my first telltale sign of a narcissistic sibling is that you are not equals. So there is some level of inequality in the family, raising this sibling above either just one other sibling or all of the others, so to show the world that they are superior. Now, I'm going to come at this because it's the Scapegoat Club, from a scapegoat lens where the scapegoat is basically blamed for everything, the bottom of the pile, the most inferior. So let's just talk about it from that perspective.
And she makes a great point that they weaponize your own empathy and this sense that family is number one and blood is thicker than water. So they very much, especially like a narcissistic older brother, maybe older sister, but it could be also a younger sibling. But they use this sense that family sticks together and there should be this forced harmony and this sort of blind loyalty.
And when they're in our families, there's this idea, this social idea that we should have a close relationship, and perhaps this person is trying to manipulate or maneuver and take advantage of the fact that you should have a close relationship with them, but they're actually causing a lot of problems, potentially a lot of hurt in your life.
And even if they mistreat you and aren't necessarily loyal to you, they expect that you're going to do that for them. But she makes a great point that they weaponize that and they use that against us and to their advantage in the way in which they manipulate and push the envelope in terms of the way they treat us. The first main point she makes is that the sibling must be superior to the other siblings or to the scapegoat. This certainly is the case that they get treated differently because of the golden child. So it could be the parents grooming and enforcing this sense of superiority. Although sometimes these roles can fluctuate and change, this sibling very much wants and needs to be in a superior position. If we take narcissism, we understand that's the personality disorder that really ensures that they want to feel superior to everyone. So they're constantly on the lookout in ways in which they can be superior.
The narcissistic sibling cannot think of themselves on the same level, the same kind of equal playing field as a scapegoated sibling. They just can't. And it might show up in different rules applying to one sibling to another. One sibling might need special treatment, certain extra privileges. Excuse me. There is going to be some inequality, and it's not just somebody needs something this time and then, the other person gets, a bit of an advantage another time. It's a consistent across the board. Always the narcissistic sibling is better, higher, has privileges, special treatment, gets away with stuff. Honestly, in my situation, it's almost like they live in under a different set of rules.
So that's certainly the case with a narcissistic sibling. They must be superior to you. Yeah, she's mentioning the notion of like a double standard. So you're judged by a different standard, and then this sibling tends to be judged by an entirely different standard.
And actually, when we get to the point of kind of pointing out these inequalities and wanting to kind of address them in the family, it's like the narcissistic siblings cannot even abide to think about being on the same level as us or people that they think are below them. It's such a blow to their ego that it can't be tolerated.
So there can be special treatment and privilege given to this sibling. They tend to be the golden child, but not always. They have the sense that they're special and more important than you. This can just be like it consistently across the board is what she mentions. So it's not just that given circumstances or change of day or a few months pass, but this is like this chronic, ongoing way in which they need to be superior to the siblings and typically express that with others too.
So it's very much a case of they're up here and other people are down there. That is the status quo. And that would vary from with healthier siblings who understand, yeah, you know what, we're all people, we're all human beings, we're all kind of equal. Birth order kind of evens out, hopefully, when we get into adult stage, and those natural rivalries we have when we're younger kind of filter away.
She makes a good point that when you challenge this with your parents or the family, that this sibling is being treated differently, that sibling cannot even tolerate that you would even suggest that they don't deserve to be treated in the superior position. So there's this obvious sense of them needing to be superior, and they also have entitlement. Of course, this is what I deserve, this is who I am. They don't usually explicitly say that, but it's in their aura and the way they show up in terms of them feeling and needing to be superior. And then she makes a great point that when you get older and become more mature and you both individuate, that of course you can understand maybe when children are younger or even as teenagers, there's going to be some sibling rivalry. But her point is that even when you guys develop and individuate and become adults, there is still this need from this sibling to be superior, to be better than, and to always put themselves above you. And so you would think that even those things would become less pronounced over the years, but you find in these narcissistic families that this stays as a chronic, ongoing issue, that they need to be superior. And typically the narcissistic parents, even as they age, will have certain favoritism for one child over another and typically pit the siblings against each other.
In healthy families, we kind of realize that it's not a competition, it's not a game, it's not a race to get to a certain place or be a certain way. It's about having a relationship with someone who you have this really deep common bond with, but not for a narcissistic sibling. Another way this inequality can show up is where chores and family responsibilities are not equally evened out. And of course, it's not going to be equal across all families. People live different distances away. They have different families, different lives. But in healthier families, it's more of people kind of pitch in as and when they can. And it's kind of like a team effort.
And then she makes the point that there's this ongoing competition. You'd think that a sibling would have your back and want you to succeed, but typically you find with these narcissistic siblings, they're still chasing the sense of wanting to be seen in the eyes of the parents as better, and they do this even into the 30s, 40s. It could be over petty things like their job, education, or material wealth. They use those things to make it as though they're superior to you. She also makes the point that in these homes, there's these defined roles. So typically, there you'd think in a healthier family, right, there would be this, we're all in this together, we're all going to pitch in, how can we best support our aging parents? But as parents age, you find that there might be one sibling that just does the caregiving or handles all the issues with the parents. And typically there'll be a lot of emotional fusion with that child, with the parent, especially if a parent dies. Let's say it's the father. Maybe the older brother will take on more ownership, be more emotionally fused with the mother, and then start to adopt similar patterns than maybe the narcissistic father that passed.
Not with a narcissistic sibling. There are certain roles and responsibilities that the narcissistic sibling has and everybody else has, and these do not change. And we're expected to stay in our role, and there is no acknowledgement, there is no question around this is what you do, these are your duties, and it's almost like, I don't know, some kind of birthright is written in stone. And it could be looking after, say, an elderly relative, it could be looking after the elderly parent, and you have your job and the narcissist does exactly what they want to do. There is no, oh yeah, I can help out here, oh you need a break, or oh yeah, you do a lot of that, let me do it for a bit, how can we switch things up, or even checking in, are you okay?
And of the other children, particularly the scapegoat, aren't even asked or given any opportunity to help out. They typically aren't invited or mentioned in this situation. Of course, this happens in different dynamics in a family, but these roles and responsibilities, especially as the parents age, are very concrete and not really flexible. There's usually no discussion and it's not transparent typically. When you point it out, you're seen as being the difficult one or the challenging one. You're seen as challenging the status quo, And the sibling that's narcissistic, the parents will make sure that you get back in line, and they'll tend to deflect and not really acknowledge this difference of ways in which that sibling's treated and why they are able, and like why there's more responsibility given to them, or why they have a certain role over you. And she mentions how this is built in stone and it's a very rigid role, so that these roles are assigned and there's this entitlement that the sibling has. And then there's also the notion that this goes back to the intergenerational process. If you're not carrying favor with the parent and giving them narcissistic supply or adopting the narrative of the family, then typically you're the scapegoat and you're challenging that, then you will be less trusted by the parents who are narcissistic. And there's no sense that they're honoring the natural hierarchy or the way in which your talents or skills or intelligence are given some level of credence and support in this family, but rather these roles are assigned, and they're typically artificially assigned, so they're not usually reflective of the actual person per se. This sense that the sibling that's narcissistic has this birthright, this arrogant belief that they inherently have this role, and if you question their status in this regard, then you're certainly not at their level and not someone they have to answer to. She makes the point how there's no checking in, that it could be aging parents. I've seen this a lot with my clients, just that there's certain ways and responsibilities that are assigned to certain kids, and there is usually no communication that's transparent and this mutual giving. And typically there's not even a checking in on how you might help out here more or how we can work together in this regard. If you live in a different city or you're not in the same area of your parents, maybe you have a sibling that is closer to the parents, and you would think that you guys could talk about how we support our aging parents. But typically in these families, there's no transparency around that. These roles are fixed and it's not addressed or talked about. And if you raise an issue about it, you probably are going to be scapegoated, and the family's going to react and not acknowledge that there needs to be a discussion about this. And the second point she makes is that long after the narcissistic parents are gone, the sibling will continue to enforce these rules and enforce the sense that they're superior than you. And so you think that when they're past, the parents pass, you can go back to being siblings again and not have this animosity towards each other. But her point is that actually typically it gets worse, and they very much are, that they're very much invested in ensuring that they stay at the top and superior than you. And you actually typically it gets worse. And so
that kind of ties into telltale sign number 2, which is that the narcissistic sibling will hold on and enforce the rules of the narcissistic family, those roles that we play. They will enforce them long after the narcissistic parents have gone or have kind of faded. We think that when we grow up, our narcissistic parents are in charge and they are the ones that assign these roles, and woe betide us if we even think about stepping a toe out of line as to what is expected in the family. The narcissistic sibling wants to keep that going. Unless it suits them and they want to they can figure out or want to find a way to elevate themselves a little bit more. But in general, what that looks like is keeping the other people in less dominant roles, more subservient roles, and the narcissistic sibling is in charge. They do not want these rules to change. They do not want the roles to be evened out, because again, this is what keeps them top dog. This is what keeps them afloat.
I've seen some people reach out saying they thought that when their parents passed that they'd be able to have a little more of an equal relationship with their siblings and some addressing of the matter maybe with the way that the parent was. But her point is that no, typically it gets worse, and the sibling that's in that superior role, they typically enforce it. They're the ones usually being bullies and putting you down, subjugating you to the scapegoating role. They might do that in front of your parents or behind your back in terms of a smear campaign.
And so even if we're saying, oh, we can see that, oh my gosh, my narcissistic parent was a tyrant, or there was so many problems in the family, and with them potentially they've died, or they are, we moved on, they have a less of a grip on the family. If we try and talk to our sibling siblings and say, hey, let's kind of find another way of doing things. Let's talk about how we want to have our adult relationship. Now, mom or dad or both don't have that kind of iron grip on things. How do we want to do this? That's how you could approach a conversation with a healthy sibling. Get to know each other, really kind of figure out what's going to work for you in future, how you can help each other out. Not with a narcissistic sibling. No, no, no. They are just like, don't know what you're talking about. They may also come to the defense of how could you say such awful things about the parents, whoever it is, what a wonderful person they are, and how can you betray the family values or honors, or even think about saying anything bad about the way things have been done.
But they're very much invested in you being in the scapegoating role. Even if they've been in that scapegoating role in the past with the parents, they'll ensure that you're put in that role, and they will do various ways to ensure that happens. Her point is that after the parents die, it can get worse and certainly doesn't improve. The narcissistic sibling typically will defend the narrative. You'd think that if a parent acted like a tyrant or was abusive and neglectful throughout your life, your sibling would acknowledge that, have sympathy, or try to understand that and want to develop a mutual relationship with you. But her point is that no, typically they want this narrative, and they are the ones that typically will gaslight you and deny that it's actually that bad. So typically they're minimizing and ensuring that the narrative continues on.
There's just no way those rules are going to shift, or that they're going to entertain the idea of those roles shifting.
And this is the notion of the intermittent transmission process throughout the generations. So typically they're continuing this corruption and this way in which people are ascribed to certain roles, and there's this fixed way in which things are going to be done. So they very much want to stay on top, and the way they do this, even after the parents die, is that they continue to make you subjugated to them, even if you don't play ball. And she makes an important point about the narcissistic sibling. If they have their immediate families, like your nephew or your niece, they'll actually put that child ahead of you as though it's like this royal family and birth order. They feel special and entitled, and they need to ensure that their child is put above you and that their family is above you.
And actually, this is a little bonus giveaway of a narcissistic sibling. What they will do is, as their families, their partners, their kids come into the family role, what they will do is they will elevate that their immediate families now above the sibling, the scapegoated sibling, or the other siblings, if it suits them and if they can get away with it. And so in such a giveaway that the narcissistic sibling sees the scapegoated sibling or the invisible siblings as so inferior to them that their immediate family and their children will be bumped in up the hierarchy. It's kind of like a royal family where the sibling actually gets really shoved down the list because the birth order kind of goes to the firstborn type thing. It's almost like that. And so you can find that, yeah, the kids of the narcissistic siblings end up in a more superior role to some of the siblings. And don't get me wrong, I'm not really interested in this hierarchy, but it becomes really difficult and really challenging and kind of embarrassing as well when, say, for example, a narcissistic sibling is rude or talks in a demeaning way to an adult sibling in front of their kids. And it's just like, hang on a minute.
They will basically alienate you from your niece or nephew and make sure that you're in a lesser position. So that's a very important point, specifically if you're the scapegoat and you've been challenging the status quo and not going along with what the parents wanted. They will alienate you from your niece and nephew if they have kids. Yeah, and her point too is that they will likely talk negatively about the scapegoat in front of their kids. They'll poison that relationship and make it sound like that's the crazy uncle, or that you don't have to worry about him or her, she's the crazy aunt. So they very much will alienate you if they see a need to.
And the underlying message is that the narcissistic parent is teaching their kids that, oh yeah, that aunt, that uncle, that member of the family is just, down here.
Yeah, she makes the point that in a healthy family, your sibling would want you to have a good relationship with your niece and nephew. But especially, I think, as they get older, they probably would see you as a threat. And they need to always be like their false self needs to be in a place of being unquestionable authority to their child or maybe their partner. And so you might, as a scapegoat, and that relationship you have with their son or daughter could be seen as a threat. So they probably most likely are going to undermine that relationship, particularly as you get older. You might experience this just in very subtle ways. It's like you come over maybe for dinner at their place and you find that maybe your nephew doesn't want to speak to you, or they might say certain things about you in front of their son and daughter and put you down. Certainly, this is concerning and something that does happen in these dysfunctional or narcissistic families.
Sign number 3 is that the narcissistic sibling will triangulate so much. And when I say triangulate, I mean they will use other people to elevate their role and to keep other people down.
Another point is that you can't get a genuine connection with your sibling. So you might throughout the years reach out to them, want to develop that relationship, but they simply won't have it.
So number 4 is that we can't get a genuine connection with a narcissistic sibling. It just isn't there. When we try and get to know them, when we try and connect with them in as equals, as a peer, as an adult to adult, how are we going to manage this thing in our family? How do we want to approach the challenge of getting older, looking after parents, all of those things? There's just no way of getting to know a narcissist in general because it's all a fake facade. It's not there. And so when we try and get to know them and try and have that relationship that we want with our siblings, especially when we realize that our parents can't do it and aren't there and are so flawed and or potentially so abusive, we turn to our siblings for, can you help me? Can you support me? Can you remember? Can we have a connection, and can we have that family bond that I'm missing and I need?
And so you're always feeling at a distance from them. There's this notion that they're present, but there's always this absence as a presence. So you're always trying to, maybe if you guys have shared interest or something that they're interested in, you reach out to them and ask them questions about their interest or ask them if they want to do certain things. Maybe you live in a different city and you find yourself always coming there to see them, but they would never come see you. They don't generally want a relationship because they don't think that they're equal to you. And so they're always putting themselves above, and they'll usually explain away how you're not close with them. They also have animosity and resentment simply for you being alive. Some of my clients have spoke about how there's particular reasons why their sibling might be against them. Maybe it's because the parents weren't supposed to have a second child, or they were maybe a little bit older and then you came along, and there's probably a lot of resentment from a very young age. So yeah, they don't want you to develop a genuine relationship with you. There's a pseudo-mutuality. They say everything's fine and that on the surface are fine between the family and they're loyal to you, but then they're always putting themselves above and they'll never really nurture that relationship. And her point is too that there's always this fake facade that you can't really develop a genuine, authentic relationship with somebody who has this false self, and it's not real, like it's not a real person really there in some sense. But her point is, as the parents age, or if the parents have been narcissistic or abusive or neglectful towards you or towards all the siblings, then you'd think that you could confine and get support from your sibling. But again, typically they are gaslighting you and minimizing the concerns of the parents and putting you in a position as a scapegoat simply for raising the truth. So that's an important point she's making. See, I thought it was a great video. It talks about narcissistic siblings, how you'd think that as your parents age, you could have a different relationship with your siblings. But her point is that typically these narcissistic siblings continue this pattern and ensure that you're in this position of lesser than. They can carry on the lineage of this intertransmissional process and ensure that this collective undifferentiated ego mass continue. And it's really unfortunate because it might mean that you have to limit or go no contact because, again, they're alienating you typically from your nieces and nephew and almost like developing this royal family or the sense that they're superior and their family superior and their kids are superior to you. And meanwhile, you just want to have a mutual relationship with them or with your niece and nephew, but they're undermining and subjugating you to a lesser than position. I've seen that in clients I've worked with where they're helping out with their niece and babysitting and caregiving for them, but you have the narcissistic sibling undermining that relationship and speaking negatively to the son or daughter about the scapegoat in front of the kids. It's very unfortunate. It does happen. In this video, I just wanted to cover this video by Chess, and it was just a good overview of typical situations when dealing with a narcissistic sibling and certain signs that you can tell, certain scenarios that typically will arise, especially as the parents pass, things to think about in terms of narcissistic family dynamics. So if you did like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks and have a great day.